Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot on the plate, maybe not quantity wise, but certainly there's a lot to bite on, to use a carnivore metaphor. And we'll start with, in the big scheme of things, kind of a lighter note. And then as Brady went on down to a resounding defeat at the hands, even though it was a home game for him, at the hands of the Cowboys. Um, Question one, is it his swan song? Question two, did he overdo his welcome? I know the answers to both, or I believe I do. I'd like your input, though.
Yeah, I think he has overstayed his welcome. I mean, as a longtime New York fan, I was absolutely flabbergasted this weekend when the Giants made the playoffs and both the Patriots and Tom Brady were eliminated.
Yes,
um,
yes, and kudos to the coach, by the way.
yes, and I don't know that we've seen his swan song yet. I think we should have. I think he should have retired. I think his best days are behind him. But now he's got to pay for a divorce, so he may just stick around for the paycheck.
Actually, I think he's the luckiest guy on earth, but he's highly talented, obviously. I think he might actually. I think it'd be they just call it even because I think she's worth more than he is.
That's possible. I have no idea what her net
Yeah, I
worth
think she
is.
made more. Anyway, they
I
probably
mean,
call it a
the
draw.
fact, yeah, the fact of the matter is, in the divorce settlement, it's the world's smallest violin that's playing for both of them. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not going to shed any tears, but yeah, I think he's a smart guy. I think he overstayed his welcome. I'm a little surprised about that. He's an intelligent person, and it's not like he was just a librarian that retired and basically that's the end of the road. I mean, I'm a little surprised of his lack of creativity. I get coming back, the first time, or I mean, continuing with the Bucks, but I mean, the world is even at 40 something. The world was his oyster. He could have had his own talk show, could have easily been an analyst for CBS, Fox, you name it.
Well,
So,
he already has a job lined up when he does finally retire. He has been hired by Fox Sports.
there you go. I did think again an outstanding career, and he made all the right moves, which is a Tom Cruise movie, a la 1982, sports related, by the way. Uh, but he did a little screw up on this one the last 2 years. He just could have gone out invincible. The man, a god, and he's God, but
Well, I mean, I don't know that he was ever invincible. I mean, remember there were loads of quarterbacks that did great in the postseason, and none of them ever got nailed for stealing signs and for deflating footballs.
that is
So
correct.
there is that black mark because we do know that he had cheated. He had destroyed evidence of his cheating, destroyed the cell phones, etc. So
Did he
yeah,
consult Hillary?
I don't know if he consulted Hillary or not, but I think we did see that the Patriots dynasty was mostly because Belichick and Brady got away with cheating, and when they parted ways, neither one did as well as they did together.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of a degree of cheating, but also they were like Jagger Richards. They just were 100% in sync, and none of
There is
them
that.
will do. Or I'm talking about Belichick. He'll never
Yeah,
do. He'll never be up to that level as he was. They needed each other.
I think you're right on that. Yes.
Okay, so moving on to more serious matters, we have the Biden docs. This is profound on so many levels. It's even hard to digest, again, given the carnivore metaphor. Um, First question is let's just talk about damage first. Your assessment on the damage. I have my own feelings, but I will defer to the doctor.
The damage at this point is incalculable to
Incalculable.
Biden.
Thank you. Yes. And let me just interject
It,
one little thing. Gergen, who was kind of on both sides, meaning he helped Republicans and also Democrats. Maybe not his biggest fan, but he basically echoed exactly what you just said, that the implications, the damage is incalculable.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a good look at what's going on. First of all, his lawyers allegedly found the first batch of documents in an office at UPenn. Now, UPenn has been under fire for taking a lot of money from China.
That is
And
correct.
the advisors from UPenn were the ones that pushed Biden to stop investigating China and to let them off the hook. So there's a lot of controversy about the classified documents being there. Then you move on to the classified documents being found in his garage. Now, not only is his garage not secure, he makes a big deal. Well, he had his Corvette was kept in the garage, so obviously it was a locked garage. Yes, it was a locked garage,
That is
but it was
not
all
secure.
right. But it was also a garage that had a lot of traffic. Hunter Biden had access to both of these locations.
Hold on for one
The,
second before you get into Hunter. It's all relevant. I get it. But in terms of the level of national security and security, a garage is at the security level of putting your road bike in. Okay,
yes,
it is. It's you can open windows. You can pick the lock with probably a friggin' toothpick. It's really not exactly Fort Knox.
No, it's not. And in terms of who had access, again, Hunter Biden had access to both of these locations. The garage, in particular, was featured on an episode of Jay Leno's Garage. So you had camera crews in there, you had people in and out with no security clearance. On top of that, after the documents were found in the garage. White House spokesperson came out and said, we are being transparent. We are cooperating fully. We have finished our search and there's no more documents. And after she said that, the special counsel found more documents in Biden's home. So we still don't know what these documents are. The search, as far as I know, is still not over because they keep finding. And as much as the Democrats want to deflect this, they want to say, "Oh, well, it's very different from Donald Trump."
Yeah,
It's like,
it's
no,
worse. How does that
it's
sound?
it's worse than what Donald Trump did because the documents that Donald Trump had, the National Archives handed them over. They knew what documents were there. They knew where they were. The only difficulty they had is the dispute in getting them back. With Biden, nobody knew the documents were there. Nobody knew how they got there. Nobody knows what they are. They found the first batch in November prior to a special counsel being appointed to investigate Trump. Prior to the midterm elections, it was all covered up until January. So all of this just piles on. You have CNN going nonstop about this, and they are attacking Biden. Okay, this is how bad it's gotten when CNN is attacking Biden.
Well, and the
And
press briefings. Wait, press briefings went from Kumbaya, 1967 love fests, to the press has gone full tooth into this.
yes, they are. As far as I can tell, the only press that
MSNBC.
is still trying to defend Biden is MSNBC and The View. Everybody else has said, no, this is bad. We have to get to the bottom of this. And Adam Schiff came out and said that this could be a threat to national security. When Biden loses Adam Schiff, that's an indication that this is really bad.
Okay, and the other thing, he Biden already had a competency problem. This, I think, is a brush fire gone to full bore forest fire. He's going to be. He was at some kind of an event. I think it was. Now it doesn't. I don't really recall who was. It was an English diplomat, someone from England, and the press was just badgering him with the questions, and he again looked like just smiled. In other words, it's going to position him optically as well, not just politically, but optically as the idiot that he is. He's
Yes, and
incapable, and
he had this.
it's also going to postpone any chance of a press conference, which is almost a year in the making. Go ahead.
Yeah, he also had the same situation when he met with one of the Japanese ministers. They had this meeting, they come out, they're in front of the press, and all the press wanted to talk about were the documents. And Biden just sat there with this blank look on his face, not taking questions. It's making him look really bad. And of course, it doesn't help that he went after Trump, say how irresponsible it was that he had documents and now he's caught with the same thing. And you're seeing more and more pundits point out the fact that every time the Democrats went after Trump, every time they go after the conservatives, they're going after them for something that they themselves have done. It's not going to be a good situation for them.
Okay, I'm not. We're both. I don't think big fans of Donald Trump. I think again, Biden's situation is far worse. First, he didn't have the authority to declassify, and second, Trump's stuff was under real lock and key,
Well,
not in a friggin' basement. I mean, in a garage.
yeah, let's just clarify that Trump did not actually have the ability to declassify. The president doesn't have that. What the president has is the ability to start the declassification process. So he could not unilaterally have said, no, these are declassified. But what you've got is, yes, the documents that Trump had were in a safe that only he had access to, that were protected by both private security and the Secret Service. Biden had these in his private library, in the garage, no
And you
secret.
can see them in the picture.
Yes,
You can literally,
yes, the New York.
it is totally hysterical. And again, to your point, is when he was so, righteous about, how could you be so foolish with national. I mean, you could play a clip of that. I mean, it just looks so ridiculous. And it
Yeah,
proves also what a bullshitter he is. He has no convictions. He could give a shit.
no, he's never had convictions. But yeah,
Never.
the New York Post actually took a frame of video from the Jay Leno's Garage episode and was able to blow it up and circle where the classified documents box was. You could see it in that photo. So you had all of these people traipsing right by the classified documents. And I mean, honestly, my big concern is that all of these locations, including the UPenn office, were accessible by Hunter Biden. Now, yes, there are no espionage charges again. Chuck Todd went off saying, "Oh, there's no proof that Hunter Biden has committed a crime." That's actually not true. There's proof he committed several crimes, including tax fraud and lying on a form for a gun permit.
And
But
disposing of
we
a gun
know
in a
that
schoolyard, by the way, that's a
but
felony.
we do know that he is an incurable drug addict. And we know. Now, say what you will about drug addiction being a medical condition, whatever. We all know that if you're a crack addict, there is basically nothing you won't do to get a hit. You're telling me he didn't rummage through the garage for things he could sell, for things he could make money off of in order to support his habit.
Yeah, and it's also what you said before. I mean, forget about it, which you're correct, by the way. That issue aside, if you're on crack, your ability to have sound judgment, let's just say, is
Yeah.
relatively severely, I should say, compromised. So who knows who is trading in there? Anyone could have positioned themselves. Yeah, agents of China. Who knows? The is it big enough to disrail his 2024 prospects?
I think that depends on what happens now. Um, Certainly, and honestly, I do believe that we know this was leaked to CBS, the initial finding of documents. I do honestly believe it was leaked by Democrats who do not want him running again. But I do think it shows that he's not responsible. It shows that what was sold in 2020 as a return to normalcy and we're going to be the adult in the room, it shows all of that was a bill of goods that the American people were sold, and I don't think anybody's going to buy it a second time.
I would agree, although there's some polls that say that Biden, for some inexplicable reason, is 9 points ahead of a fictitious race with Trump. I think that just goes to the fact that Trump's got to walk away.
I Yeah, I think that has more to do with Trump than Biden.
Oh no, I
I
agree,
think
but it proves that Trump needs
if
to go.
they put yes, but I think if they did a poll of Trump versus Joe Schmo Democrat, Joe Schmo Democrat would also beat him by 9 points. I don't believe that there's a chance in hell of Donald Trump getting through the primaries.
I hope you're right because he's the only, and I grant Paul Ryan, not a big fan of, but I agree with him on this. The only chance the Democrats have is Donald J. Trump.
Yeah,
That is
that's
a
true.
fact.
I think Donald Trump would give the election to the Democrats again because he's already done it in two elections. So this would be the three strikes you're out. But I don't think the Democratic establishment is going to fall in line behind him. I think at this point it's more likely that Ron DeSantis would be the candidate, but we at this point we don't know. Remember, at this point, in past elections, nobody had heard of Bill Clinton. Nobody had heard of Barack Obama. So it's very possible that a Republican could come up from the ranks and surprise everybody.
I think that's
But if
that's
somebody
probably
like
the
that is
probability.
yeah, I think if somebody like that is going to be able to convince Ron DeSantis not to run or to beat Ron DeSantis in the primaries, then they won't have any trouble beating Trump.
100% agree. Again, focusing on the Biden situation, some people call this referred to as the Biden crime syndicate. Hunter has claimed that he was paying $50,000 a month. Whew, 50,000.
Yep.
You could stay in the Waldorf Astoria for less than that
50, yes, $50,000 a month.
a month.
That yeah, that's a penthouse in New York. Um, Honestly, there's only one phrase to describe this, and this is money laundering.
Money laundering.
Plain
Yes.
and simple. This is how they're getting payments to the big guy without him declaring it on his taxes and
Oh, what he
without
did declare, and he only
the paper
declared half that.
yeah, he's not declaring all this on his taxes. He's not They're trying not to leave a paper trail that would show that he's actually getting the money from China. And again, the office at UPenn, he got an honorary professorship. He never taught a class. He was paid $1 million by a university that was getting the donations from China. Again, this is money laundering. And that's something that I think the Republicans need to investigate.
I would agree with that. It's also the gang that couldn't shoot straight. One hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. Hunter's claiming 50. The boy genius Biden is claiming half that.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah. Really? Okay. Yep. I hear you. Yeah. So
and
I think
also involved in all of this, there was a great story in the Australian, which is an Australian newspaper, in which one of the intelligence agents that signed the now infamous document that said, oh, the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. He said point blank, "Oh, we knew at the time that most of the information on there was true."
Yes, and it's very troubling. Basically, you talk about deep state, perfect example. And there's no question that, the Hunter laptop from hell, other aspects of the Biden crime family easily could have swayed a very close election. And it would beg the question: are we really living in a democracy or an entrenched state?
Well,
Um,
we've already seen polls that said 52% of Biden voters would not have voted for him if they knew about the Hunter Biden laptop story. They were unaware of it because it was suppressed by the media. So, and yes, it was a close race. So, 52% of Biden voters either staying home or switching their vote, that would have swung the election. So, yes, this is election interference.
Yes, and I also bring back Chris Wallace, who, if it wasn't for his father, would be saying "Welcome to Walmart," putting the kibosh on any discussion during the first debate. Yeah, Trump did act kind of like an imbecile, but Wallace didn't help the situation out at all. Um, Speaking of China, there's a report saying that China now, which is just a known fact, has a larger navy than the United States, and gaming it basically indicates that China would win on in an actual conflict. That's very troubling, I believe, and really troubling for the United States because even though we have so many problems, one thing that was always, I'll use a term, indisputable was our military advantage. I think that's also evaporating.
It is evaporating. I mean, we've seen reports in the past saying that our Navy is not ready for any kind of military conflict. We know that the military changed their focus to woke pronouns and making people feel good rather than being ready for combat. We are in big trouble if we have to go to an armed combat. Now, I say that, however, the big thing that we've got in our favor is that despite the woke nonsense, despite our Navy not being ready for combat, is that the Navy is not the only military branch we have. And we still have very good strength in our Air Force and Marines. So we have we still have an advantage in an all-out conflict, but in minor skirmishes where it's a naval battle, we could be in big trouble.
Yeah, but that brings up the bigger issue, and I'll interject the Virginia school situation with the merit scholarships, Scholastic Merit Awards. And you look at our military, by the way, you're right about our Air Force and our Marines, but they're not exactly on the ascend either, okay? Um,
No, and in fact both of those branches are having trouble recruiting qualified soldiers. Or
exactly, because
say no,
no warrior is going to join a group that's
or
worried about, safe
tech
rooms.
right, technically I should say they're having problems recruiting Marines and pilots.
Yes.
Soldiers is the army.
Um, but anyway, you look at things like what is at the base of this? You know, Wokeism, liberalism, people pretty much hate America, destroying the institutions that made America a superpower at one time, a lone superpower. So you destroy the military, which they're well on their way to, with woke generals or even affirmative action generals and what have you, military officers. And then you have in the Virginia school situation something you brought up, put on the docket a couple of weeks ago. So now you go after basically excellence in the scholastic arena, and you switch, excellence to orchestrated mediocrity. At its essence, isn't that really the destruction of a superpower or a world power, the very power that 50 years ago got us to the moon?
It is the destruction of a superpower, but it's also the guiding philosophy of socialists. Socialism cannot function when people are operating at peak performance. When they're operating with a goal towards excellence, they go, well, no, socialism by definition brings down everybody to mediocrity. And there's an apocryphal story that's used to illustrate this, where, and this has been thrown off of social media because people claimed it was a true story. And no, it's apocryphal, but it's still accurate. A class starts, and the professor says, well, what we are going to do is your grades are going to be evenly split. So the first test comes along, and the good students study and they work hard and they work towards their A's. And of course, the lazy students don't do anything because they know, well, everybody's, going to get the same grade anyway. And they average the grades out, and everybody in the class gets an 80 because the folks that really worked hard actually earned hundreds, and that brought everything up. Well, now the second test comes around, and the kids that studied hard went, well, if I'm only going to get an 80, why should I work hard to try to get 100? So they stop working so hard. And in the next test, everybody gets a 60 because they've stopped trying. And it brings everybody down. This is how socialism works. And that's what is behind this wokeism is they want everybody to get equity. Well, guess what? When when everybody gets equity and gets the same result, that result keeps going further and further down. And we've seen it. And I find it absolutely hysterical when socialist Democrats push for the open border because these folks are coming from socialist countries. They're fleeing socialism. If they get to the point where they are US citizens who are going to be voting, they're not going to be voting for socialists.
That has been proven out. Yes, the Hispanics are the fastest group fleeing the Socialist Democratic Party. Um, Other troubling news: the debt limit, the ominous bill. Um, when is this chicken going to come home to roost? When I was in high school, the debt, I remember this because Reagan and Carter were debating this, was 500 billion. So adjusted for inflation, let's call it a trillion. A trillion has become a rounding error. Okay? What are we up to? 25 trillion now? This is unsustainable. And what does it say for entitlement programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid? The chicken's going to have to come home to roost, or they'll just have to zero it out and the United States declares bankruptcy and start over again.
Yeah, what's going on right now is the borrowing cap is at $31.4 trillion dollars. And we are scheduled to hit that cap tomorrow. So we are legislatively unable to borrow more money. And a lot of, the Democrats keep yelling, well, we have to borrow more money because we need that money to pay off our old debts. Okay, if you did that with your credit cards, you'd end up in in debtor's prison,
There you
back in
go.
the day. This is The Republicans seem to be standing firm
They should.
on cutting spending, and they need to because we keep raising the debt ceiling and we keep borrowing and borrowing, and our spending keeps going up. And this is not a Republican or a Democratic problem. This is a political problem
It's
because
a
both
swamp
parties
problem.
have been, yes, they've been spending money hand over fist like drunken sailors, and it's time it stopped. I mean,
But there's no
realistically,
reason for
the
it to
the
stop
last
because there's no consequences. Like I said, yeah, it's an ancient history. In the late '70s, 500 billion. That was the big topic of the debates. Even with Ross Perot and Bush and all that and Clinton,
yep,
the debt. No one even gives a shit about the debt anymore. It's a joke because there's no consequences as of yet.
the problem is that people have been bought off. The Democrats spent in the last 2 years spent a ridiculous amount of money giving money to people so that they would vote Democrat. The Republicans have give it done the same thing with pork projects. They haven't been as blatant as just handing people checks, but they've done the same thing. Case in point, the last spending bill that was passed in 2022 included millions of dollars for a hiking trail to be named after Michelle Obama. Really? We needed that? But we are borrowing this money, and most of it is being borrowed from the Chinese. We are handing over our national security in order to fund these ridiculous projects and in
We're not
order to hand
handing
money out.
we're not handing over our net. We've handed over
Yes.
our national security, and
Well, no,
basically,
I would still say handing because we haven't stopped.
that's
We're
right. It's in
still doing
process.
it.
There you go. Well, speaking of the Democratic ideology, right here in our state of Connecticut, Dr. Lopkin, we have a gentleman by the name of Kevin Ryan, a representative in Connecticut, who wants to basically have a situation where kids under 12, I believe, can get vaccinated without their parents' approval. And doesn't that dovetail completely into the Virginia situation about not letting parents shouldn't have, which is McAuliffe said parents shouldn't have a role in education, which basically sunk him, didn't it?
It did, and I'm hoping this sinks Kevin Ryan. Just to clarify, the bill that was put forward is an act allowing children 12 years of age and older to receive a vaccination without the consent of a parent. And this is an ongoing problem. We saw it in Virginia. We're now seeing it in Connecticut. We're starting to see it in other blue states where the state is saying, we know what's best for your kids better than you do.
But
We are
isn't it
going to
overall the
take over.
socialist? It's a socialist
Yes,
argument,
it
just
is.
like you've
They
articulated
want,
throughout the entire podcast.
yeah, they want to take over the care of your kids. And again, the I'm blanking on her name, but the head of the teachers union has said these are our children. No, these children do not belong to the teachers. They do not belong to the state. They belong to their parents. If now my kids are older already, the youngest is 18, but if a school or the government tried to tell me they know what's best for my kids better than I do, they're going to have a fight on their hands. And I think you're going to see parents revolt more and more as these things get traction.
I would agree. Well, speaking of an overarching government and socialist ideology, we mentioned on the last podcast that New York State wanted to take away or ban further sales of gas stoves, even though that 40% of American households use them. And in the end, Dr. Lopkin, they're a lot more efficient than electric and cheaper. Again, doesn't it go to the ivory tower liberalism ideology? Plus, do you have better things to do? Natural gas is almost 100% clean, although
Yeah,
AOC says it causes brain damage.
well,
I think she's
AOC
used.
has brain damage.
There
Yeah,
you go.
it's I mean, let's not forget AOC is somebody who's too stupid to make it in the private sector. She's a social media influencer playing it being a congresswoman.
Yes,
So,
actually never worked in the private sector. Well, bartender, I guess,
well,
but
yeah, she was a
didn't exactly
bartender,
rise
but
to the top after spending probably 250,000 on a very expensive Boston University degree, one of the more expensive schools, by the way.
yeah, and you're already seeing blowback of this, and not from homeowners. I mean, homeowners are aggravated by it, but restaurants and the restaurant industry is up in arms because they know you cannot cook at the same quality on an electric
Not
stove
even
that you
close.
can on a gas. I've had an electric stove for years, and if my house was capable of handling a gas stove, I'd have changed over years ago. This is something that the restaurant industry knows, and the fact of the matter is, they can't now go, oh well, we're taking your stove away. They have to do it as banning new sales. Guess what? Gas stoves last a long time, unlike electric stoves. So you're going to have stoves from the 1970s and 80s still in operation 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah, there's no question about
And
it. And again, it gets to the bigger issue. Geniuses, liberal geniuses out there, gas stoves are 100% more efficient than electric. There you go.
absolutely. And of course, they forget the fact, and they keep poo pooing this argument, but they want all electric cars. They want all electric stoves. Well, guess what? The grid can't handle it.
And the grid is dirty because a lot of the grid is still fueled by fuels and coal. But
Right.
that's
But
liberalism
even
in its
even
essence.
more than that though, take a look at California. California made a big deal. They're trying to phase out gas cars faster than anybody else. And just this past summer, they had to make an announcement that you couldn't charge your electric vehicle because it would overload their grid. So yeah, they don't have, and now they know that the grid can't handle this. I was discussing this with someone yesterday. There is a group of electric companies and appliance manufacturers, and Google is part of this as well. And what they're talking about is putting a system in place that if the grid cannot generate enough electricity, they would actually reverse the process and take that electricity from your electric car while it's charging. So, what you're going to have is you're going to have your electric car charging overnight so you can get to work in the morning, wake up, and your car's not going to be charged because the electric companies decided they needed the electricity from your car to stabilize the grid,
Although
and now
Nancy
you're not going to be
Pelosi,
able to get to work.
I'm sure Nancy Pelosi will have a special charger. That's the way it works. Well,
Of
Dr.
course.
Lopkin, another episode of Carnivore Bites. A lot of meat there, I should say. And I believe next week when we're on again, I think the number one issue is still going to be Biden's docs.
Well, no, because remember, we have a very special episode next week.
That is
We are going
correct.
to be we are going to be focusing on crime, and we have a former police officer who will be joining us on our podcast to talk about what's going on with the police officers, how they're dealing with the demoralization of defunding the police, how they've been overworked, and what the consequences are, and what we can do as individuals to keep ourselves safe from the growing crime that's spreading across the country.
And I
So
believe,
don't miss next week's episode.
do not miss it. And I believe I gave you the perfect setup, unintentionally, though. Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
And remember, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you all next week for a very special Carnivore Bites.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Locke.